It's been mocked by comedians, battled over by politicians, and targeted as a community of troubled neighbourhoods. But to many of the inhabitants of Scarborough, which makes up much of the eastern portion of Ontario's capital city, it's mostly been overlooked. Our next guests go some good distance to try to change that impression. So let's welcome Catherine Hernandez, whose debut novel, Scarborough, was a 2017 Toronto Book Award finalist, and David Chariandy, the author of Brother, which is also set in Scarborough. It's also been shortlisted for the 2017 Rogers Writers' Trust Fiction Prize, and it's great to have both of you here in our studio. I tell you, I told you earlier, I read both of the books. They're both fantastic. I'm so glad to have you two here. But I need to settle something once and for all right off the top here. You're looking at a former City Hall reporter who covered Scarborough 35 years ago, and I always called it Scarborough, and everybody I knew called it Scarborough, but then I've had people tell me around here, it's Scarborough, not Scarborough. So go ahead. Which is right?
Well, because of the fact that I am from the Filipino community, I like to call it Scarberia. That's me.
Wow. Okay, that's no help to me at all. All right, David, you're going to help me break the tie here?
There's also Scarberia.
Well, now that's a nickname, though, but I'm not looking at that.
I think Scarborough.
So the way I'm doing it is fine.
Yeah, I think that's the way I call it.
Camera 3, please. All you people in the control room who've been giving me a hard time for the last 2 weeks, you're wrong, I'm right. So there. Okay, down to business here. David, to you first. What story about Scarborough did you want to tell in Brother?
Well, I guess I wanted to, first of all, tell a story about two brothers growing up in Scarborough. I mean, I think that personal relationship between family members was the first thing I wanted to tell. But I also wanted to tell a story about the vitality and life within a suburb that is sometimes, I believe, misrepresented.
Obvious follow-up question, how much of this is autobiographical?
Well, I grew up in Scarborough.
Now, you just called it Scarborough and not Scarborough.
Yeah, it's my television voice. When we're off camera, I'll call it the proper way.
Okay, good.
I guess I grew up in Scarborough, like the boys in my story. My mother is a black immigrant from the Caribbean, from Trinidad. My father is South Asian. I experienced many of the feelings of vulnerability that the boys experience in the story. But the novel is a work of fiction, and I think what prompted me to write the novel more than anything else was thinking through the question, what if? So what if my life, which turned out, I think, rather well, I certainly consider myself a privileged individual. What if it took a different turn? What if at any one moment my life was slightly different? And
you experienced what so many of the characters in your book experienced.
Yes,
Yeah.
and certainly I experienced many of those things, but what if those had effects that were truly negative and lifelong?
It's interesting, you've dedicated the book to Austin. You have not provided Austin's last name in the dedication, but of course I look in the very back, and I'm assuming this is Austin Clarke you're dedicating this book to.
Yes.
How come? Why to him?
Well, Austin Clarke is sometimes described as the first black professional writer in Canada. So he came to Canada in 1955. He wrote his Toronto trilogy, the first book of his Toronto trilogy, the first novel, you can say, substantially addressing black life in Canada in 1960. And it was about centering on black domestic workers. And my mother came to Canada as a domestic worker from Trinidad. And when I read Austin Clarke for the first time, I was a young adult at the time, I thought, wow, you know, he's representing lives that I thought were not worthy of representation. I mean, it's kind of a twisted thought, but to imagine the ordinary and extraordinary dignity of one's parents to be unrepresentable, not worthy of literature. But he did that. And so he also later on mentored me quite directly, and he inspired me, and I think he inspired a generation of writers, including black writers in Canada. And he passed away last year. I read a passage from one of his novels at the funeral. And he always talked he supported my first book, and he always asked about Brother, and he supported it in many different ways, and so I felt it was appropriate to dedicate the book to him.
Nice. One more before we get Catherine in here. You don't live in Scarborough anymore, right?
No.
You moved about, what, 14 years ago?
Yeah, 14, 15 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does it still feel like home when you go back?
That's a great question. I think I was glad that in my novel I represented the Scarborough that I knew, and the Scarborough of the late 80s and early 90s, because when I was living in Scarborough. And the Scarborough of today seems to me very different. I think other people need to tell those stories. People who are located in Scarborough now have a lot to say about the Scarborough of today, and those are the stories that I'm so excited to read. I mean, it goes without saying, Catherine's book is such an exciting and important book, and precisely because it is about the Scarborough of today.
What a brilliant segue, which I'm going to jump on, and here we go, Señorina Hernandez. What story about Scarborough today were you trying to tell?
It was a story of resilience, most definitely, and the impact of a literacy center on a low-income neighborhood in the East End. I just wanted to show about the fact that there are no monuments in Scarborough, like really well-known monuments, but what exists between us, the space between us, like serves as our monuments.
Your book is called Scarborough, a novel, and yet I have to assume it's based on real people, real events,
Yes.
real places.
Yes.
So how much of it is, we always want to know this. How much is true and how much did you make up?
Well, I think that we probably have the same practice, is that even though you interview people, even though you're inspired by people, it's really you're working on the residue from them. But you don't, I personally, I don't do it. I don't base it completely on those stories out of respect for the people that I am interviewing. So it's just almost like a jumping point, but out of respect for those people, you don't want to use like actual facts from their lives. That's just me. I imagine that other writers might have a very different practice, but historical facts are obviously very important to keep by, but personal stories, I like to just use it as a jumping point.
Well, it's interesting you say that because Colin Ellis, our producer, who's
Yes.
produced this segment here, after he and I both read the book, we sort of compared notes with each other, and the parts of the book that we enjoyed the most were the, I gather, fictitious, but they seem so real, email exchanges between, the facilitator at your Ontario Literacy Program and her supervisor. Mm-hmm. And the tension between the two of them, and clearly the two of them are from different worlds and on different pages and have no, anyway, we really enjoyed that. Yeah. Give us a flavor of what you're trying to get at with their relationship.
Well, I've shared space with a lot of people who work on the front line with communities, most especially low-income communities. And what I knew was, having been a home daycare provider not 6 months ago, is that I understood that every time there was a new government in place, it meant that they were holding their breath, hoping that they could keep their jobs, because if a new government in place is there, it means that their platform and their focus might change, which means that all of their outreach that they've spent years building, trying to build trust with these community members, could be gone in the blink of an eye simply because of a decision made in an office far away. So because of that, I wanted to create this world in which you understand the emotional truths of these people that are on the front line, who are affected by decisions made in offices far, far away, who have no sense of commitment to those communities.
And this was what was so infuriating when I read it, which was, you've got this person on the front lines who really wants to do good by her clients.
Yes.
And really wants to know them and be involved in their lives, and you've got this functionary somewhere else, probably, downtown Toronto, Queen's Park somewhere, who's basically saying, now don't get too involved.
Yes.
If something happens, you don't want to be involved in their lives and hurt them didn't you want to smack her at some point? As you were, you made up this character, but still, she must have infuriated you the way you made her up.
Well, what's so funny? I receive messages from social workers all the time saying, "Thank you so much for creating the clapback that I never got." Because I couldn't.
Creating the what?
The clapback to a manager that in this book, in this fictional book, that I never got in real life.
Oh, okay.
And so it was really wonderful to hear that I was able to author into being a reality that they were not given, and a lot of social workers haven't been given. I was actually at a class at U of T recently talking about this, because it seems that a lot of universities want to include my book as part of the curriculum, but not so much for creative writing, but more for people who are future social workers or educators. And when they were asking me, yeah, right? And they were asking me, well, what would you say? Like, what kind of message do you want to give us as future social workers and educators? And I said, I want you to consider the fact that most of the good that Miss Keena does in the book is actually against the rules.
Right.
So consider that as future managers who are now going to have a master's in social work, is that when you're sitting in your office far, far away enjoying a nice cup of hot coffee while the frontline workers are battling with bed bugs and lice, I want you to consider your actions.
Great point. Your dedication is also, well, actually even more mysterious than David's. There's no name on yours. Do you want to put a name on it? Do you want to tell us who it is?
No, for reasons of respect to this particular person. So I was...
I can read it here. Let me just...
Yeah, certainly. No, for
Your
sure.
dedication. I was 15, you were 4. I taught you drama in a Scarborough Community Center. You were surviving neglect. Wherever you are, I hope you are safe, and I know I loved you enough to write you this book. That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
You.
Give us a sense of who that is.
Sure. Well, I was at a Scarborough Community Center, young teenager, very naive, because it was my first, you're just looking for a chance to do volunteer hours. And because of the fact that I was a drama major at Cardinal Carter Academy for the Arts, I wanted to volunteer at a nearby community center. Went into this community center, but they said, okay, so we're interested in the drama classes that you're offering, but more for the children that can't seem to blend in with the general population. So then they put me in this room with children who seemed to have behavioral problems. One of them was a child that was surviving neglect. And I still remember, and this goes to show you like the resilience of our community, it's like being this 15-year-old person who didn't know much about anything about teaching children, teaching a 4-year-old girl how to brush her teeth in the washroom. And because of the fact that she was so neglected that she didn't know how to do basic things like how to swallow properly, how to dress every day, and brushing her teeth. So I still remember that very clearly. The last time that I saw her, I was in the subway and I saw her and I was like, oh, it's nice to see you. And there was her grandmother who had taken, she was like the only person next of kin that was willing to take her, but obvious she was not very happy about this decision. Refused to look me in the eye. I see her leave the subway, and I could tell that she was trying to lose her granddaughter on this very crowded platform. So imagine that when I saw this, when Arsenal Pulp Press said, like, what do you think about this particular cover? Like, it's just an idea. And I saw that it was a young girl running on the subway platform. That was the last image that I had of this girl. And I think about her often. Especially because I'm a mom, I hope that she's okay, although I have my doubts. But I wish her much strength wherever she is.
Where do you live now?
I live at Port Union Lawrence, which is actually just down the road from where David's parents live now.
So you're, unlike David, who got out. Do we want to put it that way? No, we don't want to put it that way. No. Unlike David, who has found other accommodation.
Yes.
You're still there.
Yes, I am.
And?
And, well, I'm sad that we never got to know each other when David was actually living in Scarborough, but I am very happy to be just like a couple of blocks away from his parents, so he has no excuse when he comes to Toronto to not visit me.
There you go. Okay, here's where I get to embarrass both of you. David, have you read her book?
Of course.
Catherine, have you read his book?
I absolutely have. I read both of his books.
Okay, so I didn't get to embarrass either one of you, actually.
I highly recommend it.
Okay, that chapter was pretty quick and easy to get through. Let's do an excerpt here from David's book. This is from Brother, and the narrator is the one speaking here. Sheldon, bring this excerpt up if you would. The world around us was named Scarborough. It had once been called Scarberia, a wasteland on the outskirts of a sprawling city. But now, as we were growing up in the early 80s, in the heated language of a changing nation, we heard it called other names. Scarlem, Scarbistan. We lived in Scarborough, a suburb that had mushroomed up and yellowed, browned, and blackened into life. Scarborough, I don't have to tell you, has been the butt of jokes ever since, from time immemorial. What is it like growing up as the sort of, poor cousin within the metropolitan Toronto family, if you want to put it that way?
Yeah, I guess growing up, the poor cousin of metropolitan Toronto, I guess it can be sometimes not great. And I think, in my experience, a lot of the kids growing up in Scarborough, and I think very specifically about visible minority kids and black kids, felt a certain gaze upon them, essentially because of the reputation Scarborough had.
So a harsh gaze then?
A harsh gaze, yeah. Scarborough being understood quite erroneously as a place of, solely a place of crime and just problems, social problems. And so to grow up being looked at as a problem, as the embodiment of the problems of Scarborough was never a positive thing.
I mean, the story you have chosen to tell about Scarborough is sad. It's deeply sad, it's deeply troubling. It is a slice of that city's life that, breaks your heart. Right. That's the story you wanted to immortalize. Do you have any mixed feelings about doing that?
Well, there are, the story does offer, hard and sad circumstances, and I think I would describe those as truthful circumstances for some people growing up in Scarborough. But ultimately, I would say that the book affirms the vitality of life and the resilience of families within Scarborough and against many of the challenges they face, challenges finding employment, challenges understanding oneself, growing up and understanding oneself as a valued member of the society that they live in. I think actually the novel affirms the beauty of the lives of people within Scarborough. Ultimately, it does that. But yes, I think part of that means attesting to the sad circumstances and the hard circumstances people sometimes have to live.
Let me follow up, Catherine, with this. Before Toronto became the megacity, it actually was 6 separate cities.
Yes.
Actually, well, it was 5 and 1 borough. I mean, there was the old city of Toronto, there was East York, York, Etobicoke, North York, and Scarborough.
That's right.
And everybody used to kind of joke about Scarborough being, as I suggested, the poor second cousin. But in your view, what made or makes Scarborough stand out from all of those other neighborhoods, jurisdictions within the megacity?
Yeah, I mean, I want you to imagine that, as David and I were growing up, is that it was a changing time. I still remember when we were becoming part of the city, and one of the stories that I shared with David when we first met was that I was living on Beach Grove when I was a child, and this man knocked on my door to give us a flyer to sign like a petition saying that this townhome complex that was affordable housing down the road, he said that it was going to change the neighborhood for the worse because those people were going to come. And I remember, because we were the only brown folks on that street at that time, and I remember taking the flyer thinking, oh my gosh, he means us. He means us, that we're going to change the neighborhood for the worse.
You're those people.
We're those people, exactly. And so growing up, I understood that, especially because now we're going through another wave of, it's changing back and it's being gentrified because of, with richer folks wanting access to downtown from the lake, is that to have this attitude of the fact that, if there's less of you, it makes the neighborhood better. So that's how I've grown up. I've grown up understanding that my presence in a particular neighborhood was not welcome and that we made things worse. And so I'm thrilled by the fact that brown and black folks are so resilient that we actually still have a whole lot of pride in the way that we share space, and that we really enjoy things that don't actually require a lot of money, such as sharing a bucket of KFC by the lake, or getting cheap clothes at National Thrift Shop. Those are the things that we enjoy, and those are the kinds of things that you can't get downtown, that kind of genuineness and that truthfulness.
But that guy's opinion, did you think that was representative of a majority of the people there, or was this guy a one-off?
I'm not sure.
I mean,
certainly not of my folks that I share space with, but I don't know about how you feel the same way, David.
Well, I guess maybe another way of asking the question is, how many times do you need to hear that before a message is delivered and that message scars you growing up, and you understand that there are a number of people who believe that, and so it may not be everyone. I mean, I think there are good. I definitely believe there are wonderful people in Scarborough, and there are wonderful people of all backgrounds in Scarborough, generous, sharing, and whatnot. But there is also kind of precisely what you've described, a sense in which certain people unfairly are considered a problem, and children growing up in that environment do feel that gaze, let's call it.
Yes.
I don't know whether either of you had to have this conversation with your respective publishers, but let's imagine, in our fictitious conversation here, let's imagine that somewhere along the line a publisher came to you and said, I need to sell books in Kingston, Hamilton, Mississauga, Ottawa, Thunder Bay, Sudbury, never mind outside the province of Ontario. Why is anybody going to give a damn about what happens in one corner of one city? Therefore, why do I want this book? I see you nodding. Did you have that conversation?
Well, it's a familiar, so when Michael Ondaatje wrote In the Skin of a Lion about Toronto, now probably considered one of the quintessential Toronto novels, his someone, either a publisher or someone said, no, don't set it in Toronto because one can't ever sell a book set in Toronto. This was maybe for an international audience, but he did. And I guess one could imagine the same thing about Scarborough too. Why on earth would you set a novel in Scarborough? And of course, I guess the term in the publishing world is legs. It limits the legs of sales, potentially. Yeah, that's the thinking anyway. Except that when we think of the great literature, I'm just throwing two authors out randomly, great literature of this country, someone like Alice Munro. So no one went to Alice Munro and said, this Alice Munro country that you're consistently evoking, this small town Ontario or small places in BC.
Jane Urquhart, same thing.
Yeah, and that will limit, the way in which your book writing is received, or to Alistair MacLeod, and a writer whom I admire consistently, setting his novels in Cape Breton. That will limit the reception of your novel or books and stories in other parts of the world.
Well, you at least don't title your book Scarberia. You've got it in the title.
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you have to fight for that title?
No.
No?
No.
There was no pushback on...
Yeah, for your first book, and this is my first book, is that we have a Vancouver publisher, Arsenal Pulp Press, and they were very open to the fact that it was going to be set in Scarborough and it was going to be called Scarborough. I think just because I guess one of the angles for the book is the fact that people are really intrigued by that part of the city, just because it's not like it has the street cred of like the Bronx or anything like that. It's just kind of, for me, it's a bit of like a comical tackiness to that part of the city that I really hold dear. There's something about the fact that someone is going to have a ringtone to CNC Music Factory in the back of a bus. Nowadays, I mean, that's Scarborough. There is a tackiness to it that's just so lovely, and it's a very specific flavor that I feel that a lot of people will want to read about, and I'm completely fine with that.
Okay, we have got a few minutes to go, and I want to touch on a couple of more things here. This is a clip we're going to show you. We did a program recently on CanLit, and here's Jael Richardson, who's the artistic director for the Festival of Literary Diversity. We'll come back and chat after we play the clip. Go ahead, Sheldon, roll it.
But I think CanLit, the term, has always made me a little uncomfortable because it's that institution has also been a bit exclusive and has left some people out.
Okay, quick follow-up then. Did those voices exist and the country just simply didn't listen to them, or did they not exist in the kinds of numbers that they obviously do today?
I think it's a numbers thing, but I think it's also an inclusion thing, a welcoming thing, a system that sort of says we value your voice.
The suggestion that the sort of glory days of CanLit back in the 1960s, 70s, certainly there were some great writers to come out of that time, but they may not have really represented the great diversity that is the country today. Does that ring true with you, Catherine?
I think that, especially because I work in theater, I always like to challenge people by what they consider to be classics. And
gotcha.
I definitely feel there was a certain amount of privilege to be part of that CanLit canon that I'm not a part of, and I'm perfectly fine with that. For me, what I feel really proud of is the fact that my book is coming, like literally, it was launched the week that I closed my home daycare. So going from being a low-income single mother to being an author that is now doing my book circuit, I'm very proud of that. And whether or not I'm part of a CanLit canon, I really don't care.
Okay, gotcha. David, your view?
Jill is absolutely right, I think, and at the same time, and I know she knows this very well, and she's spoken very, very eloquent about this in various ways. Always in any period from the 60s to the present, there are always other people writing. There are always diverse voices, and it's a matter of supporting and hearing those voices that I think CanLit has to work on. So that back in the 60s, Austin Clarke was writing, and Harold Sunny Ladu was writing, and many other people were writing extraordinarily important stories. And now we have Catherine. Now we have many others I can name also writing, but those works have to be, I believe, appreciated for the perspective on Canada that they offer.
I cannot have two people from Scarborough in this studio without asking them the most important political burning question of the day, which is LRT versus subway.
This question keeps on coming up.
I'm sorry, but it is a subject that has bedeviled Toronto City Council for years. The mayor has, of course, put his political prestige on the line for this. LRT or subway? Go ahead, Catherine.
Well, for someone who dragged Mount Galloway from the CBC on the SRT and enjoyed the rickety sound of it all, I would definitely say subway.
And you're prepared to pay $4 billion for it?
I would, and also I feel that it's worth it. If you think about the working class in Scarborough who are working so hard downtown, absolutely that, and buses.
David?
I'm going to defer to Catherine on this one. As someone who's not residing in Scarborough right now, I think I'm listening to what she has to say.
This guy's ready for politics. You see the way he dodged that question? That was fabulous.
That's right.
That was absolutely fabulous.
Think 3 times before saying nothing. Yes.
Okay, you know what? I want to say one more thing, which is I actually went to Scarborough about 3 or 4 weeks ago because a buddy of mine named Arthur Milnes, who now lives in Kingston but is from Scarborough, born and raised and loves it to bits to this day, said, do you know you have a 500-year-old Indigenous graveyard in Scarborough, and have you ever seen it? And I said, I don't know what you're talking about, and I've lived in this city for 40 years. So I went and took a look. Tabor Hill.
Right, yeah.
At Lawrence and Markham Road.
Yeah, no, I know about that. Yeah.
It's beautiful, it's simple, but who knew? It's a 500-year-old Indigenous graveyard right there in the city of Scarborough. Yeah.
Yes.
So go see it, anybody.
Yeah.
And pick up these books while you're at it. David Chariandy, the author of Brother, Catherine Hernandez, author of Scarborough, a novel. So great to have you two with us here at TVO tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit TVO.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.